must learn. You have to learn how you can do it, how you can be an investor. Probably the most important thing is to learn is what you're good at. I am horrible at what Vince does. I am probably the world's worst trader, the world's worst market timer. But so far what I've done, I find things that are cheap and where there's change taking place, and I stay with them a long time. That works for me. Vince has his own way. What Vince does is he does much shorter term
but in many times, though, we end up in the same sort of
I
areas.
understand that.
It's like, you know, like sometimes people have got different ways to do addition. You might add up one way or do maths one way, and someone else has got a different formula. And in many cases, we actually end up in the same areas. Yeah, but we just get there different ways.
Just learn what you're good at. If you come up here and want to be a great short-term trader like Vince, don't do it unless you know how. First thing you have to learn as an investor is what you are good at and what works for you. And then look, and if it's throwing a dart against the wall, that works for you, do it. Don't let somebody come in and say, you old fool, you're throwing darts. Listen, if it works, do it. Whatever works, do it your way, and don't try to emulate other people unless you do it the same way they do it. I got distracted, whatever I was saying. Anyway, it must not have been important, I would remember.
I love it when Jim says short-term trader, and you know, typically my trades are 2-3 years, and I'm a short-term.
Okay.
But compared to 20, it is.
For mine are 2 or 3 decades. So.
Okay, my favourite was the same one that I was here 3 years ago, and I said, look, put a little bit of money into this, and you'll cover your seminar fee. And I'll say exactly the same again. Is palm oil, okay? And palm oil. And I love it that nobody knows, because when people say, oh yeah. Palm oil is used, we'll go through it later on because we're going to talk about it anyway, and I'll show you a couple of companies listed here in the UK that are up about 200-300% in the last few years, but this can still go higher. Jim will probably explain to you where palm oil comes from. It's used a lot for soaps, processed foods, and as more and more of the world getting to processed foods, they're going to use more and more palm oil.
If you want to buy the contract itself, it trades in Malaysia. And the Chinese are trying to start a new palm oil contract, which won't do most of us any good, because you can't, as a foreigner, you cannot trade in China yet on the futures exchanges. But Singapore, too, is planning to start a palm oil contract in December. I don't know if they will or not, but it's Malaysia, possibly Singapore in December, possibly Dalian in China later or earlier next year, if you want to buy the futures themselves.
Yeah. You are actually better off buying the futures, and actually we can bring this to another question. If you buy the futures, you're buying the raw thing. If you're buying shares in plantation companies, then you also take another risk, because the management might be loonies, etc., etc. Now, so far, I've invested in what I believe are good companies, because there wasn't really enough to trade in the futures. And I'll tell you the companies later on. But the bottom line is these are companies that own plantations, mainly in Malaysia. Anglo-Eastern Plantations is one of them. But the reason why I went down the stock route, it was easier to do that than to actually buy the futures. But if a proper futures market starts, that'd be good.
If I could just...
Yeah.
If you finish that...
No, go ahead.
The studies, people are starting to do studies about commodities, which they didn't do for a long time, the academics and the consultants. You know, in my experience, just because a commodity goes up, it does not mean that a company that produces that commodity will go up. For instance, in the 70s, oil went up 10 times. A lot of oil companies did not go up at all. With companies, you have to worry about management, the government, the environmentalists, the unions, the balance sheet, the pension plan. You have to worry about 100 things. And you have to get the right companies as well. The studies have shown, the academics have now shown, that in the past 40-odd years, you would have made 3 times as much, 300% more, investing in commodities themselves rather than commodity stocks. 300% more investing in the commodities. Now, if you're really good at picking stocks, do it, because obviously you're going to make a great deal more money in the stock if you get it right. If you find a company which is going to find natural gas in Berlin, I urge you to buy all you can and then call me. And I want to buy it too, because that's going to make us a fortune. But unless you're good at that, there are probably 500 natural gas companies. Natural gas has tripled in the past few years. Well, there was a huge American company called Enron. Enron was a natural gas company. Enron went to zero. Natural gas can go down, but it cannot go to zero. So there's a lot less risk in the commodities themselves than there are in the stocks. If you're good at the stocks, do it, but otherwise you probably should learn more about the commodities.
And it's a good point. A lot of you have got interested in gold, and I think I said earlier, gold is not one of my favorite commodities. I don't believe it's Jim's. I've got some gold in various funds and what have you. Just because you buy a share that's called ABC Gold and you see the price of gold go up, it doesn't mean that ABC Gold's going to go up. You have to realize a lot of these exploration and mining companies, they don't actually have any gold. What they may have is an option to mine a piece of land in Timbuktu somewhere or whatever. So they've still now got to extract the land, extract the gold, etc., etc. So it is far simpler just to go for the raw things, the actual commodity. It just cuts a lot of things out. Occasionally, as I say, with the palm oil and what have you, I went down the company route because it was quite hard to back it.
I want to tell you a couple of stories about gold, if I may. It's your party, so...
No.
But there's a famous American humorist named Mark Twain, and he explained to people that the definition of a gold mine is essentially a hole in the ground with a liar standing at the top.